In related news, the stalemate between the world's largest music company and the short-form video app was made public once a deal regarding their licensing agreement fell through. UMG released a strongly worded open letter to its artists and songwriters, explaining that all of their music would be removed from the platform if a licensing agreement was not reached by the following day. TikTok replied within hours, calling UMG's letter a false narrative and that it was sad and disappointing that UMG has put their greed above the interests of their artists and songwriters. It noted that TikTok acts as an important free promotion and discovery tool for their artists. In a more recent turn of events, aside from pulling their whole catalog from the app, UMG issued a strongly worded reply in response to the whole issue that reads, and I quote, "TikTok's own statement perfectly sums up its woefully outdated view. Even though TikTok has built one of the world's largest and most valuable social media platforms off the backs of artists and songwriters, TikTok still argues that artists should be grateful for the free promotion and that music companies are greedy for expecting them to simply compensate artists and songwriters appropriately."
Well, I will admit, I actually am on TikTok a good amount of time, and nowadays when it comes to finding the top hits, I really look to TikTok. So I actually think that UMG pulling their artists out won't be a huge loss for TikTok. But on the other hand, I completely agree with the statements of Universal Music Group. Artists should be compensated. We are past the time where simply exposure is the payment for creatives.
Exactly. And these artists and songwriters are actually the reason that TikTok is still there. I think it's a mutually beneficial thing, what's going on between TikTok and Universal Music. And just because they are asking for compensation, it doesn't mean that they're not grateful, right?
Of course.
Gratefulness, the gratitude will always be there. However, I think they deserve to be compensated for their contribution, which is major, to TikTok being famous and having staying power.
It would have been great if they could have come to a compromise so that, the users as well, the 1 billion users could be happy. But I mean, with both ends, there's positives and negatives to their decisions. I just hope as well that they could listen more to how the artists feel. Because I think that's what's most important. So I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday with Olivia Rodrigo, and she said that her first hit actually became famous because of TikTok, and that's how people have known her. But I've also read so many statements by different artists saying that, yes, TikTok gives them the exposure, however, it's just passive exposure rather than active exposure, since only a few seconds of their songs are really what's listened to by the users.
And it's quite sad that these things were not put in black and white prior to any of these things happening, prior to any of these artists and songwriters becoming famous because of TikTok. They should have written down everything formally, like made a contract out of it so that it would not come to this, and it has come to this. It's quite
Perhaps
sad.
The artists as well didn't know that TikTok would become as big as it is now. However, they did have time to set that in stone before major decisions like this.
That's why it so happened that they pulled out the artists and the songwriters. But we still continue to hope that something good will come out of this, and that, like you said, they will meet halfway regarding contracts and compensations.